on good soil, we're going to ask the question, what is the difference between the predominant arrangement of a household in the United States, which is the suburban home, and the homestead that may or may not be in the country or out in a rural setting? We all know that one of the things we're experiencing in our world today is that there was a rapid change in the last couple centuries from an essentially agrarian society to an industrialized society. And what happened was the family was necessarily divided up so that different people could go work in different industries, different factories, different expertise, and they went out to those jobs, and they did those jobs. And at this point, a lot of us have experienced the benefits of those things. We've experienced the abundance in material goods, but a lot of us are starting to take stock in what it's actually done to the family.
I'm Mike Sullivan.
I'm Gwen Sullivan.
And we're on your farm here. Does your farm have a name?
Twin Cedar Farm is what it's always been called.
Okay.
Before we owned it, and we kind of kept
You
that.
just inherited that.
Yep.
So when did you move here?
We kind of had a funny story with moving here. I was pregnant with my 7th child, and we were due to sign the paperwork for the house the next day to close, but they said we had to have the baby, so we went to the bank on our way to the hospital. So
we signed
my
on the
daughter
house,
and the house came on
the same day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, was your intention to move here to be homesteading, or why did you come out into the countryside?
So we always wanted to be in the country. So from day one, when we first met each other, Gwen's a convert also, by the way. She actually became Catholic a couple of years after we were married. But from day one, we always talked about how nice it would be to just have a place in the country where we could have gardens, and we were both really interested in that kind of a lifestyle. We lived in town. We lived in Denver for a while, and then we lived in Steubenville. We lived in Massachusetts before Steubenville. And while we were living in town with 6 kids, with the 7th imminently coming, we just really felt the call to get out into the country where we can have a more intentional life and a little bit more of an intentional Catholic community within our home. That's without the constant interruptions and constant distractions that we found were very common in town. And
how would you describe, so what do you mean by, what's the difference being intentional here? You're saying you were unintentional in the town, or what was going on there?
Well, when we lived in town, we lived in a really great neighborhood with a lot of other homeschooling families, but we didn't have, it's not about really control, but the kids, they would wander off with other kids, and we wouldn't necessarily do things as a family. The kids would go off to their friend's house and go off and do this and that. But when we moved out here, we have to, pack everyone up and go somewhere. And so at the time we had a lot of little kids, so we would all go somewhere as a family, or we would have other families come and join us. So instead of having play dates or sporting events or whatever, we tend to bring other families here, and we have hospitality and fellowship and things among our neighbors.
It wasn't that living in town was a problem.
No.
It was just that we longed for a more contemplative life and a more intentional Catholic community within our home. It was sort of, all of these things in town were vying for our time, and it was kind of intense. And so getting out here and kind of separating from that a little bit. We still have all the same friends. We still spend time with the same people, but now we spend more intentional time. And the time that we have is more quality time, and not just sort of, random kids going to different houses at different times all throughout the day, and things interrupting the homeschool process, and all of that. Now it's, people don't just show up, they usually call before they come over.
A lot of people understand that some of the consequences of industrialization were pretty ugly early on, and the church was very uncomfortable with some of these. Pope Leo XIII, Pius XI, and Pius XII all writing to discuss the problems of industrialization. And one of the ones that was picked up, particularly by a lot of Catholic thinkers in the English world, was called the Catholic Land Movement, which involves great thinkers like G.K. Chesterton, Hilar Belloc, Father Vincent McNabb. And one of the things that they were responding to is that the conditions of the family after industrialization went from a place where the family exists naturally, which is the homestead, to a place where the family exists in an environment that itself is not conducive to family life. Particularly, they were talking about some of the slums and housing developments that existed around factories. People moved from the country to the cities, in some cases to what's very correctly called slums, so that they could go work for wages in the factories. And this created an entirely new economic order, which we know we're still reeling from today because it was so disruptive to the way societies had traditionally been ordered. This original Catholic land movement in England was particularly concerned about that very condition. However, in our day, something different is happening, and I think a lot of Catholic farms and a lot of families are responding to something different from industrialization, because we're 100, 150, sometimes 200 years in to an industrialized culture and industrialized society, and most of us actually don't work in factories anymore. Most of us don't work and don't live in the slums. A lot of that has mellowed out in the world, and that there has been better orders created.
For Sean and Beth Doherty, Sow's Ear Farm.
Sow's Ear Farm.
That's right. You don't know where that comes from?
Tell me.
Okay, so
There's an old saying, and we always thought it was a southern saying because we're from the South, and our families used it. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Y'all know that saying?
I've heard it. I want you to
Okay.
explain the story.
Yes.
Well, so you've butchered pigs before. You cut a pig's ear off and you tan it. It'll make the best purse you ever saw. No seams, right?
No seams.
But it won't be silk, right? So the meaning of you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear is when use your materials appropriately and don't try and make unfancy stuff fancy.
but it's also that we had another couple that they were doing more urban, we were doing more country, and they had the silk purse, and we always called ours the Sow's
Sean
Ear.
would come to me as we took a wrecked house and we're redoing it when we moved to this land, and he'd come to me and he'd say, "Do you want the kitchen counters? Do you want X or Y?" Right? And it'd be the fancy and the not fancy, and I'd always say, "You can't make a silk purse out of sow's ear. Do the
Sow's Ear version.
Sow's Ear version."
That's
So
right.
he'd call it the Sow's Ear way, and
That's
that's
better
how
than
the
the
house got its name.
That's right.
lipstick on a pig.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, so how long ago was that when you guys decided you were going to move to the Sow's Ear?
Well, it was very interesting. We were living in Steubenville. We've been living in Steubenville for 7 years. I've been teaching at the university. That's what brought us to Steubenville area. We knew we wanted to be out in the country. We'd been looking. I've been getting more and more discouraged because the cost of land, although nothing like it is now, to me was exorbitant. I definitely didn't want to go into a whole lot of debt. So we found a place that we absolutely fell in love with. It was an old stagecoach inn, I believe. And we thought, okay, this is going to be the place. It was 50 acres, had a lot of things we were looking for. And we were going to bid on it. Then I think they counterbid, or so, I don't remember. But in any event, dealing with this real estate agent, it slipped through our fingers one weekend. And he called us. We said, okay, so what's happened with it? And he said, somebody else bought it. We said, you're kidding me. So we were devastated. We went back to Oklahoma, which we had been doing summers. We went back to Oklahoma. And we came back, and a friend of ours said, well, there's this
You showed us
ad.
a classifieds ad, 2 lines in a cheap paper, right? House and 16 acres, $11,000. We're like,
We
okay,
said-
that's a cardboard box in the middle of a dump, because that's the
we
only
know
way.
that's not going to work. And so we just didn't do anything with it. And then every once in a while, they would ask us again, have you guys looked at it? And we said, no, we haven't looked. So finally, and it was a cold day, right? January, and we called the guy up. We said, we want to look at this. And this had been on the market
For
for
6 months.
Yeah.
All right.
And the guy said, yeah, you can go look at it, but if the door's open, will you close it on the way out? Sure enough, door was open.
It didn't matter because
Ceilings.
all the windows were broken.
Ceilings were falling in, all kinds of stuff. It was a dump. I mean, it really was. I mean, that's why it was
Right.
$11,000. said, there's no way this could never work. And then on the drive home, we said, but it would get us out of the city.
You could pay cash for it.
Pay cash. It had hills. It had a creek. It was going to be recreation.
It was a good
wasn't going to be a farm, but it was going to be recreation. And so we thought, okay, well, and Beth ended up talking to him and offering him.
Right. We thought we'll buy it, fix it up, sell it in 2 years, and buy a real farm. Because of course we're from the south, where farms are flat, square, have a fence around them, barn in the middle, right? And this was trees straight up the side of the hill. We thought that's not a farm.
So we took the place, and the fact that we did that,
That we bought a wreck because it would get us out of town.
and we were determined to do it ourselves and fix it up, and that it started our farming journey. And we wouldn't be we do. We speak all over the country on sustainable ag, and it's
because we bought a
because of
hunk of
that.
junk in 1996.
and we learned, but it was our learning experience. It's how we learned how to do this stuff.
In our country, one of the things, though, that happened was the suburbanization of our country. So in the 1800s, about 99% of the country were farmers. At this point, it's less than 1%. We have to ask ourselves, well, where did they all go? And the answer is, obviously, a lot of them went to the cities, but they also went to the suburban developments that were very much an intentional strategy of both the companies and the government, because these are households that participate in the type of economy that was being created in our country, which is essentially a consumerist economy. Now, we hear that word consumerist and we have a negative connotation, but every household, because it rarely produces everything it needs, consumes at some point. And what we mean by consumption is that instead of producing, growing, making, building something that you need directly, you go to work to earn the money, to bring the money home so that you can purchase that need. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, actually.
This is Holy Family Farm, Brian and Joanna Burke.
All right. How long have you guys been here?
This is our 5th year.
5th year. So you're new,
Yes.
but you're not the only ones here. Tell
No.
us, one, I want to ask, why did you come and why did you want to start homesteading? I know you have a couple different motivations from your background, but also this unique because of where you are might be a good recommendation for younger couples. So tell me first why you came to this place.
So I actually grew up here. When I was 10 years old, my parents moved from the suburbs of eastern PA and made a radical lifestyle change. They pulled us from Catholic school, both parents working, and they said if we're going to homeschool, we need community. And the area around Franciscan University was full of Catholic homeschool families. So we moved out here and we had 5 acres, and this was right around Y2K when everybody was getting into, preparedness mode. But we found real, authentic Catholic community in the rural setting. We all had milk goats, and we were raising big gardens and chickens, and so I feel like it was kind of the beginning of this Catholic homestead movement. A lot of people phased out, though, after nothing happened with Y2K, but for me, it was really a pivotal time because I had the experience of kind of the suburban life. And then I went to farm life as a kid, and I loved it. I really thrived as a kid, and the faith came alive to me on the land, and I knew I wanted that for my kids someday if I was called to marriage. And so when we started dating our junior year at Franciscan, pretty much in the first couple weeks, I wasn't going to beat around the bush. I said, hey, just so you know, I foresee staying home with my kids, homeschooling, and raising them on the land. And he grew up in Seattle and was public schooled all the way. And surprisingly, he was like, that sounds good. And so I said, oh, maybe there's something here.
So your background is you experienced sort of 2 different forms of life, and you embraced and said, I want to continue this with my family.
Yeah, I like to say I had 2 childhoods.
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. But you have different motivations. So you're coming from Seattle, definitely a city.
Yep.
but also I understand you're in the medical field.
Right. So when we got married, right after we got married, I went off to University of Toledo for medical school, and then I joined the Navy. We were in the Navy for a while, but so as we were moving around, we were very poor, and so we were trying to figure out different skills. So I was learning how to garden more. She was learning how to can. We're doing fixing up the rentals and doing different things. Just learning small skills over the years. And so as the years went on, and we were still living kind of a suburban lifestyle, but trying to do these different things, we both had this increasing desire to really put our roots down deep, stay in one place, and have some space and be out in the country. And so that when we did have the opportunity to come back to Steubenville and get out of the Navy, this farm came on market, and it was a very quick, easy decision for us to say this is the place for us to go.
Yeah. Social commentator Robert Nisbet, something he noticed that's very interesting is that the family, when it was working together as an economic unit, meaning that everyone in the family was a part of the household and a part of the, if you will, the business of the household, the economy of the household, that the family unit was more cohesive as a unit. So we as Catholics, we like to say over and over, because it's true, that the family is the foundation of society. However, one of the big problems in a consumerist society is that when they walk outside the door, the family is not the center of society. The economic churn of a consumerist economy is the center of society. It is the most important factor. And what we're often trying to do is to fit the family into a consumerist economy. So in the last episode, we talked about how if we live in a world that's completely artificial, that we can be severed from the world that God created, and that there's certain lessons and truth from God that it's harder to receive when we're cut off from nature itself. The other thing that can happen to the family is that if it's cut off from economic activity in the household itself, that the family loses what's an essential part of its function as God created. We have to remember that the word economy actually means household management. That the very purpose of the economy is for the good of the family. But now a lot of us are in the tension of feeling like we actually have to sacrifice our family so that we can participate in the economy. But then as we participate in the economy, what we do is we bring that money back home to spend with our family and for our family and on our family. So the essential difference between a homestead or a farm and a suburban home is that the suburban home by necessity is rooted in consumption.
It started probably pretty early on in my wife and I's marriage, that roughly 6 or 7 years ago, we just started to think that me leaving the home every day, working for 8 to 10, 12 hours in a corporate job, was not the ideal setting for our family to grow together in virtue and holiness. And that was the original sense that we had. We didn't know quite what that was going to mean for us down the road, but we just started exploring and praying, well, what else is there? You know, what else could I do? So for the last 6 or 7 years, we continued on working in a corporate job, but just exploring various options. And little by little came to realize, kind of through our backyard gardening and farming, bees and chickens and gardens and those sorts of things on a small scale, that was becoming a way of life for us that brought us together as a family. And as our family was growing and we were having more children, that was a way that I could work with my family and for my family, and that they could be a part of the work to provide for our family as well.
The suburban family, by definition, you leave that home every day, you earn an income through your work, and you return home with that income, with that money, so that you then use that income to purchase all your needs. So we have to remember that God actually created the family as an economic unit. And what that means is that the family does work together. We need to remember that Adam was in the garden, and he was given Eve as a helpmate. And that the normative activity of a household is to care for one another. And that does not just mean affection and companionship, but it actually means tangibly taking care of one another. So mothers obviously know this as they take care of the physical needs of their children and their babies. As they get older, those children actually join in the economic activity of the family. What the social commentator Robert Nisbet noted is that the family didn't just decline because of industrialization, meaning we were just divided from one another doing different things. There's a lot of families that each individual member does different things, and they have a very good, cohesive family unit. That is not necessarily something that has to divide them. However, when the family shares in an intergenerational bond of need, in other words, an economic activity, that the family tended to be significantly healthier as a social unit, and it actually was the foundation of society itself because it was a necessary and functioning unit of society, not merely a place we go to enjoy each other's company.
In many ways, those are the most educational, most rewarding moments, is when I, with my children, face, for example, for us, a year ago, a house burned down. Dealing with that and saying, this is not the end of anything. This is the beginning of something. And it really was for us. It was the beginning of something absolutely beautiful. As Beth says, our house, which was a 100-year-old house, died, and its glorified body, because the boys and girls, our children, with their skills now that they have, timber framing.
That they got from growing up on this
Right,
farm.
and masonry work, and all the things that they can do are pulling all that together. We've got an architect in the family. All of them are doing this, and they're all reminding each other and us of what a family is. These people who pull together.
Oh, thank you. When Catholics return to the homestead, one of the primary things that they'll say they want to do is work and be with their family. And a lot of us might question that, say, why would you want to go and do the work it takes to grow a tomato instead of purchasing a tomato? It is significantly easier to go earn an income and bring it home and go to the store and purchase the tomato. Why go through the work of preparing the soil, of planting the seed, planting the tomato, tending it, weeding it, fertilizing it, growing it, and then having to go all the way outside to harvest it? Why would you do that? And the reason is that when we need each other, and we know that both of us are doing that work as a family, and we're growing that tomato, and then we're going to share the good of that tomato together, that entire process has brought us into an economic activity that matters, so that our bonds for one another, our need for one another becomes manifest. We actually need the members of our household. It can become true in a consumerist society. Having children can actually be burdensome. If all we have to do to take care of one another is to earn enough money to provide for the bodily needs of that person until they leave us, well, that's not really an economic activity. We're just supporting that person, and the child is consuming until they leave the home to become a producer. However, when mother and father and child are all working together to produce what they need, this brings them into a type of relationship that is very real and is a more complete society. And the family is a society. It's an actual society of persons, which means it ought to include economic activity. So by working together to grow this tomato, we come back to a relationship that is not utilitarian or merely useful, but it's actually just fully human. Because we have bodily needs, because we can do this work together, we share in our humanity more fully together.
Was in the Navy. I was a full scope family physician where I would deliver babies, see patients in the outpatient clinic, take care of hospitalized patients, all in the same week. And that, when I came back here, I continued to do OB for the first year, but quickly realized that we have to start saying no to things. And we felt it was really important that our family eat together every day at dinner time. And that meant that we weren't going to do things like organized sports. We had trialed kind of a trail life group, but then COVID hit, so things changed dramatically for that. But we also realized that we're out here in the country, and so we have to make decisions that make sure we're prioritizing our family and the farm. So my work, I'm intentional about showing up, getting the work done, getting home. It means in the mornings getting up, doing the milking, and then the boys can take care of some of the other chores, in the evenings. It is hard work, and it's long days, but we're here doing it as a family. That's growing those bonds, those experiences, and those responsibilities for the boys.
So in this way, when we talk about Adam and Eve and marriage and we're being a mutual help to one another, this is not just a psychological or emotional help, but it's actually a practical help. And we as fathers know that in that moment of working together, the lessons, the value, and the time together, because it's necessary to our household, because it's productive, keeps us from falling into the snares of consumerism. So if the family becomes just a consuming household, then the danger is not just that we're having to purchase all of our goods, but that we actually just become consumers. So a lot of families have actually experienced this in the intergenerational businesses, and it doesn't just have to be homesteading or farming. There's actually crafts, services that the family shares a bond through that business that's very valuable, that having to work out the details and the reality of that business can actually be very good and sanctifying and bonding of that family. For a lot of us, however, when we have an office job or we have a job that's on the computer, what we're longing for is actually to make our families and to make our homes not just places where we're earning money and bringing it home and then consuming it all up until it's gone and we need to go get more, but actually a place where we're sharing in the work of production. The family that produces and prays together tends to stay together.
The idea that you want someone to just make more money, that's such a sad way to look at like the goals of life,
Right.
you know? It should be our lowest priority.
Right.
We should look at money as the thing that we need just to do the stuff that we need
It's another
that we
tool.
can't do on our own.
It's
It's just a tool. Yeah.
Right.
Not
You
an
don't
end.
work for it for any tool's sake.
And sometimes you're better off when you don't have it so that you can
Yeah.
improvise.
The predominant household arrangement in our country is the suburban home. And if we're really asking ourselves, what is the difference between a suburban home and a homesteading home, is that the homesteading home is producing the goods that it needs, the physical needs of the family. It's producing them directly. Instead of merely leaving to go earn enough money to purchase those goods, we're actually producing them ourselves.